Welcome, mental fitness friends, to the Mental Fitness Minute podcast with me, Scott Mickish. This podcast is sponsored in part by Mental Fitness for All, a 501c3 partner program of 40 Fit Mental Fitness, providing free and reduced cost mental fitness training for income-eligible individuals and organizations. For more information or to donate, visit mentalfitnessforall.org. That's mentalfitnessforall with the number 4.org. Welcome back, mental fitness friends. This is episode 2 of Mental Fitness Minute, and we are going to dive in with our 1-minute mental fitness practice, followed by our first listener question. One of the practices that I use that oftentimes is considered kind of a remote control or more of a conscious way to influence our unconscious nervous system is through breathing. So the first breathing practice is what's called box breathing or 4x4 breathing. So you're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold that for around 4 seconds or so, depending on your lung capacity. And then breathe out of your mouth for 4 seconds. And hold that state for around 4 seconds. And then breathe in through your nose again for 4 seconds. And you're going to repeat that practice around 4 times, ideally. The second breathing practice is what's often called a physiological sigh. And this is something we naturally do when we're crying or just before we go to sleep. We take 2 quick inhales followed by a longer exhale. And this really helps regulate your stress response and nervous system to optimize and engage your prefrontal cortex. That is the part of your brain responsible for creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, emotional regulation, impulse control, and empathy. Related to my 40 Fit mental fitness model, breathing is really all about balance. It's really about bringing your nervous system back into a state of homeostasis that's more of a balanced neurochemical state. Full disclosure, even recording this episode, I am managing my anxiety. That can sometimes feel like my brain is moving faster than my mouth, or vice versa. Sometimes my mouth feels like it's moving faster than my brain. So part of this practice is really to try to get our conscious mind, our conscious functions of our brain in sync with our unconscious mind and our unconscious nervous system, where really language comes from, and a lot of muscle memory, emotion, all of that stuff that you don't consciously have to make an effort to do. That can be really challenging when you're trying to sync up and think ahead and be strategic and focus. So this is where a lot of that becomes a challenge for people when they are struggling with or managing anxiety and that stress response. This can be done whether you're in the car, waiting in line, making dinner, in the middle of a meeting. It really is something that you can do without many other people really even noticing that you are doing a breathing practice. And part of the reason this works is because when you breathe through your nose, as long as your nasal passages are clear, if you're struggling with a cold or sinus congestion, it may be more difficult. But breathing in through your nose creates nitric oxide that dilates your blood vessels and allows you to absorb more oxygen and release more carbon dioxide through your blood. Now, holding that for a few seconds helps calm and regulate your nervous system that your body responds to as a relaxed state. And then exhaling through your mouth releases more carbon dioxide. And by doing that 4 times, this further influences and regulates your nervous system to function in more of a relaxed and healthful state that lowers your stress response and engages and optimizes your higher functioning brain, your prefrontal cortex. Because again, we have control of our diaphragm and some of those muscles around our lungs to manage how fast we're breathing, how much we're breathing. That can then impact our heart rate and different physiological operations that are going on in our system that contribute to anxiety and really need to be regulated in order to regulate that stress response and optimize, again, our mental function. Breathing doesn't mean your problems go away, but the intention is to put you in a better and healthier neurological state to optimize your mental function, to approach that stress or challenge in a more thoughtful, healthful, and mindful way. So now let's get to our listener question. A question I recently received is, how can I reduce media and news consumption when there's so much happening in the world that I need to know about? Even in My Brain Can't Poop, I liken your brain to your gut, to your digestive system. And there's even a neurological connection between your gut and your brain that we'll talk more about later. But for now, it's really understanding your brain as an organ is processing information and stimulation and neurological signals. And it can only do that at a certain rate and a certain pace and requires a certain amount of energy. Now, again, your unconscious nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, is accounting for most of your brain activity and most of the energy that's being used. So when we are in a stressed state, our higher functioning brain, which again, namely that I focus on is the prefrontal cortex, since that is the last to develop in our mid-20s, that is responsible for those higher functions of comprehension, impulse control, emotional regulation, critical thinking, problem solving, empathy, creativity, all those wonderful, amazing powers, but really needs energy and works best when our autonomic nervous system and our stress response is reduced and regulated. So when we are over consuming media and information, it's very much like going to a buffet that may even be filled with very healthy food, but we can over consume, we can overeat, we can put too much stress and strain on our internal system to process everything that we're consuming. So really the challenge and the awareness is to know what is enough for you and what is that pacing and timing. So especially in today's age where we no longer have what used to be a 24-hour news cycle, now it tends to be a 60-second news cycle. There's a new headline, there's a new story that pops up in our feed, and we feel like there's just always something that we need to know that we might be missing if we turn our phone off. So we have been conditioned to believe there is that new piece of information that's there the moment we look away. And that is really the challenge and the stress and strain and struggle that we are dealing with, is to allow our nervous system to catch up, to process what it's already processing before we overload our system again with new information and with new demand on our nervous system. So to really embrace and understand how your brain and nervous system works, that the intention is to optimize you as a human being, optimize your mental function that can be inhibited when it's overloaded, when you're overstressed, when you're overstimulated, when you have an abundance of information that's demanding your attention and you are only one person and it's not possible to consume it all at once. So what I would say for people who want to stay informed, who feel like they're maybe even addicted to media, kind of doom scrolling and just have a hard time disconnecting from social media, that really is a mental fitness practice. It's hard. It's challenging, especially when we are conditioned and driven by that emotion and that fear and stress response to know what do we need to be aware of? What do we need to be afraid of? What do we need to be prepared for? What do we need to know? And to be a wise and healthful consumer of media and a wise and healthful user of media devices, it's really important to know how to use them to your advantage, and maybe even working with somebody else who can help you navigate your stress response when you feel that you may be overloading your system. You have somebody outside of your nervous system to remind you, to educate you, to support you, to help you find that balance that you need to thrive and optimize that may be different from somebody else. Thank you for joining me today. Look for me on social media. I am typically on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can also visit 4dfit.net. That's .net, N-E-T. Or again, on most social media platforms, you can look for me, Scott Mickish, or 4D Fit, Mental Fitness. And my book called My Brain Can't Poop, A Mental Fitness Guide for Humans. That is available on Amazon in print and ebook format. It's also available on most podcast platforms. And I look forward to talking to you next time.